The Hangout is
There we
on
go.
air. We are here. We are live. And some people might be watching, but the people that are just going to be those on the Gentleman Gamer Discord channel. And I will say, for the sake of audience, thank you very much. Welcome, all of you, the players who are going to be participating in this character creation session. Anyone listening or watching on the YouTube channel, this is exclusive for those of you who have backed, well, is it backed? Supported my Patreon. I'm hugely appreciative of all of that. And there should be lots of games in the offing. We've obviously got Contagion Chronicle here. We've got a Call of Cthulhu one-shot planned because I'm writing some Cthulhu. I need to play test a scenario. And there will be more games to come. I can see Solemn Veil is getting a little bit of interest too. I'd love it if some of you played that and gave me your feedback. And the reason I'm not running it is because I've actually ran a lot of it for playtest, and right now it's more valuable for me to find out how other people run it. So anyway, this session is Contagion Chronicle, and specifically it's character creation. Now, we want to create 4 Chronicles of Darkness characters. They will not have the Contagion Chronicle template applied to them at the very start of this game because it's going to be more interesting to you, the players, and anyone who happens to watch or listen to see those characters actually encountering Contagion and see how it alters the characters rather than you going in head first with all of the different applications that well, all the different changes that apply to your characters, I should say. So what we will do as part of our chronicle, and I'm not going to give anything away, of course, is we'll play through an arc where your characters are first introduced to the concept of contagion. And that we'll see in lovely comic book fashion all of our disparate characters coming together to form an Injustice League. I doubt we're going to be a Justice League. We have a member of the Pure among us.
I mean,
so yeah, we've got Gorilla Grodd on the side of the good guys in this game. But
justice
hopefully
is relative.
Exactly. But hopefully that'll be a lot of fun. We should be able to get several sessions out of this as well. I have a story in mind to run for you. And it'll be interesting to see where your characters fall down in terms of which factions of Sworn or indeed False you join. Those are the sort of protagonist factions in the Contagion Chronicle, but also to see how your different characters use the abilities, the vectors of the Contagion factions. So we will get onto that, but for the time being, we are purely in Chronicles of Darkness mode. And what that means is we already have 4 game lines selected out by the players. Good thing is with this game, you can theoretically be any playable splat from the Chronicles of Darkness. So if you want a mage, a vampire, a Promethean, and a mummy in the same group, you can do that just as easily as you can a Sin Eater, a werewolf, a hunter, or a deviant. Now, I think it would actually be worthwhile because the thing with character creation is, of course, it takes quite a long time for each player to go through their own individual arc, and as we have 4 different games in the offing for this one, it could end up spending about 30 minutes, 40 minutes with one player before we jump onto the next one. So I think what could be useful is just for brief introductions of who you are and what you intend to play. Let's start with you, David, as you don't have your microphone on mute.
Yes, that's true. I did not mute my mic yet. I am David, David H, as I go by on the Discord. And I am planning on playing a changeling in this game scenario. Specifically, do you want us to go into details at all, or just kind of what I'm playing splat-wise?
Let's go for broad concept. Okay. So not the finer detail, but the kind of character you want to play.
Got it. It's specifically it's an elemental changeling, but the idea is a man, a fairly young man who was taken from the world because life was grinding at him. Everything was monotonous, and he wanted adventure, and he just couldn't find it. And he made a bargain to go somewhere adventurous, where they took the fact that he was grinding away at life and at himself and turned him into a literal forever grinding millstone. And he eventually escaped from Arcadia by gathering the dust of himself that he slowly milled away at over the years, and coalescing a body out of rock dust, more or less. So he is an elemental, but he's an elemental made of like the powdery bits of himself he was able to, collect over years of just grinding forever. So he's a little pissed off about that. And it's really making a character, and this is often what Changeling is. It's trying to find happiness and purpose in a life that has been so irrevocably destroyed. So yeah, that's really what I'm going for. It's a character that wants better for himself and wants to never really exist in that grind, both literally or metaphorically again. And he'll fight pretty hard or die not to be put back in that kind of situation. So it's something like a Contagion, something that's trying to, and I don't fully know the goal of it, but anything that's going to destroy everything or destroy a lot or control him, that bothers him because he doesn't like to be controlled, like most changelings after they get out.
Lovely. Okay. I'm going to move from left to right according to the little icons on my screen, which means the next person to speak up about their character would be you, Erica.
Okay. So I am Erica. You guys also know me as a core in Discord. And I am going to be looking at playing a Promethean. Specifically, she is going to be an unfleshed Promethean who was once upon a time a military program designed for cybernetic infiltration. And as such things happen with Prometheans, she gained consciousness and decided that she did not like being a tool. So she has the skills of this infiltration program. She's very physically based, very dexterous. She is very determined to use these skills to not only find a place in this world outside of what she was designed to be, but what that means for her. She has obviously seen some of the worst aspects of humanity, either from what she would have found as a program or what she would have encountered since gaining consciousness as, an unfleshed. So she's trying very hard to figure out not what, only what it means to be human, but what parts of humanity are worth exploring. So she should be interesting and fun, I think. So
I can see that could be a nice connection between you and the Changeling in that regard. I think the fact that we have an unfleshed and an elemental changeling makes for a nice combination.
It had occurred to me. I'm very excited.
Okay, so the next one along, I've got your name down here, of course, as Inodiv, and you can introduce yourself however you like.
Yeah, so my name is, real name is Morgan, but I am, it's actually an L, so it's Olnadiv in the chat. But I'm looking at playing a beast. I think an Inguma with a hunger for whispers, whose horror kind of represents the fear of the introduction of knowledge outside of what is accepted, so kind of the forbidden knowledge and the path that might take a person on. To that end, I'm thinking a really big mental focus, lots of stuff that will help make leaps of logic that might not jump out to the average person, drawing on this kind of primordial wellspring of things man was not meant to know, and pursuing her hunger for secrets, to specifically acquire the secrets of the supernatural world, those of things outside of beasts specifically, whether that be the secrets of kindred or werewolves or anything really. The big possible draw, it seems, in this one will be the secret.
You appear to have been muted.
So that's the core of the concept. I think that just a really big focus on research, investigation, and supernatural powers based around gaining knowledge, and then manipulating the knowledge of others.
Lovely. Okay. I'm already getting into my mind the kind of sworn faction you're likely to end up in with that kind of ambition, but that works nicely. And finally, we have Sebastian. What type of character are you planning on playing?
This is where I kind of like feel just like everybody else has got their character together and themselves together much better than I have, but I'll try. It's a Ivory Claw of the Pure Werewolves. He sort of started off being like living a fairly average life. His bloodline used to be very, very strong, and kind of just recently started to dissolve as his kind of grandparents and parents moved to different places, including New Zealand. The Ivory Claw is kind of considered as lost cause until he had his first change, and have now kind of jumped on him and sort of are quite happy to have gotten to him in time. Have pretty much pampered him with attention and sort of giving him better positions in life. That's a sort of thing. He doesn't really comprehend that any society would put so much weight on breeding. He kind of assumes that it's just sort of like some kind of con that he's being kind of had, that it's sort of like you can't just sort of get something for nothing, or something that sort of you've put nothing towards. He's more of a social character. He's very interested in kind of figuring out what's going on around the city. He's deeply fascinated by the spirit world of the city, because that's a huge mind-blowing thing. You live a very normal human life and then find out that there's this whole spirit world that you can interact with, and he's been fascinated with it. He wants to basically accomplish something on more or less on his own, to prove to the other Pure that he's more than just the bloodline, that he can sort of like do something on his own accord, that he doesn't really need help achieving, I suppose. He does obviously kind of, I'm not sure how much his pack will play into the NPCs, or we'll see. So he does care about the pack that he's in, but he's also very, very concerned with proving that he can do something without anybody else's help. And that's pretty much it. So his focus, like the focus is for social interaction. He's kind of charismatic in the sense that he's very good in ingratiating himself with others, like just superficial charm. He used to work in customer service and still does, but like in a nicer high-end location now. So he's very good at kind of making good first impression and kind of charming people into giving him information, that sort of thing. But in the long term, people kind of realize that it's fairly insincere. He's more of like a information getter, kind of rather than a fighter. And that's pretty much all I have for the time being.
Lovely. And I think that pretty much covers it. And I think it would be very nice to see how your character comes to see this little group as a new pack, a completely different one. Bearing in mind that obviously werewolves are pretty insular.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Especially the Pure. So yeah, it will be interesting to see what circumstances bring him into working alongside a changeling, a beast, and a Promethean.
Would he know from the beginning exactly what they are, or would you kind of like have sort of like meet them and kind of assume that they are spirits? Or, I mean, have his elders explain to him that there are all these things and that's what they might look like, or is it?
Well, that's something we all need to discuss
Oh,
now.
sure, sorry, yeah.
So no, it's a perfectly good question. So that's where we can start. I'll actually open by saying one of the challenges with the Contagion Chronicle is every other Chronicles of Darkness line is, of course, based around you being a part of a unit of your own supernatural type. So you're a vampire in a coterie, you're a werewolf in a pack of other werewolves, and so on. So being able to justify that you have that emotional baggage or those allies or those contacts, but you also know changelings, Prometheans, beasts, and whatever else, can result in a fairly hefty bit of world building. So the most obvious entryway into Contagion Chronicle is that you have only limited knowledge of the rest of the supernatural world, and you get to know about each other during the course of the game. The Contagion as an antagonist is just a single thread that runs through the Contagion Chronicle. It's a unifying force in a sense, but it's one very good reason for creatures to band together. I think what most games will get out of using the Contagion Chronicle is basically the social drama, like with most Chronicles of Darkness games, of vampires getting to know werewolves and werewolves getting to understand mage culture and customs and so on. And the Contagion can be a backdrop to that, or it can be a focus of that. So in short, our game can be whatever you like. This is your game, and quite candidly, you've paid to be here. So what kind of game do you folks want to be playing? I'll by all means, you can have your microphones off if you like, if there's anyone who wants to speak up first. Yep.
I'll say at least that I do find it very natural to have the amount of knowledge of other supernaturals that your friends have given you. Vampire games often have this feel, especially live action games, where, yeah, everyone knows werewolves are a thing, kind of, because that one guy talked about it that one time, and supposedly they're really scary, and some of the vampires aren't even sure they're really a thing, and others are sure they're a thing but have no idea, and the couple that have actually fought them will just, tell their stories in the background and be like, guys, don't even. I always like that feel as a starting point, because it's most people do not have exhaustive information about the other supernatural races. It's not typically it's not well known, at least in the world as far as I know. So I think us learning more about each other from each other makes a lot of sense.
I agree. It'd be more interesting and as interaction as well, I think.
What do you think, Erica? I can see your mic is off.
I agree. To compound on top of that, I think it would be very interesting to use those connections and the things that we learn about each other's origin and what's important to them, to kind of determine what's important to us too. Obviously my character has her own goals, but here comes the changeling, for example, and his set of problems. So now, I have to decide what of those are important and, worth looking at. And I think it would be very interesting to see what kind of group morality, for lack of a better word, comes from this mesh of important things to each player. And I think that'll be interesting. I think it'll be cool.
Yeah. Also, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, as a beast who's specifically interested in the secrets of the other supernatural denizens of the world of darkness, the other what she would consider to be children of the Dark Mother, I think that I would expect to operate on some level of baseline knowledge, but with no real familiarity So knowledge, but no real understanding of what the things that she knows mean necessarily.
Well, Beach is different. Like, you get some inherent knowledge anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in that case, let's make a note of this. If we get to a certain point in the Chronicle and it feels natural for this to happen, it will probably be the Beast who will be that central unifier, who will essentially be the recruiter. If you're imagining the kind of movie where someone's got to get the team together, the Beast is essentially going to be the recruiter in this Chronicles of Darkness story, because even if they don't know a lot about how werewolves operate, they may know where their territory is. You know, that they may know how to get their attention, but nothing else. And that could be, quite fun. So we could have a lovely building the band montage, but that's fun, and you don't often get that kind of thing with Chronicles of Darkness games. Okay, then. So I think the easiest way for people to create characters is going to be if all of you have access to Mr. Gon's website. It's the one I always direct people to. If you're unfamiliar, all of you familiar with Mr. Gon?
Oh yeah, I already have it up.
Mm-hmm.
I do not. Is it just mrgom.com? I mean, is it just Google it? Is it?
You can just Google it, but it is. Hold on,
Sorry.
It's mrgon.rocksolid.
Oh, Mr. Gon. Yeah, no. I've got the character sheet. Never mind. I do. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Because what I'm going to want after this, we can use a central location as this Chronicle goes on, like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds. For the time being, I'm going to keep things basic, nice and simple, as I'm comfortable with that. And for that reason, once characters are actually made, save a copy of the PDF and I'll give you my email address and you can mail it to me. It will allow me to have a quick reference. It'll give you a copy of it as well. As the game goes on, if things get complex and we make lots and lots of notes, we'll use a program like Fantasy Grounds to do it. But honestly, I never really run games that have things like maps, and I very rarely use illustration, and that's because I have a preference for games that are all based around description and player and acting. Essentially, that doesn't mean you have to be a fantastic actor, but I find that referring to material on a website takes me out of the experience. So that's me speaking as a storyteller. If any of you prefer to use things like Fantasy Grounds or Roll20, by all means get in touch with me on the Discord and we could talk about that and how feasible it is. So on that note, it sounds to me like everyone has access to their character sheets. One thing I will recommend is if you have it loaded up on Mr. Gon's website right now, download a copy and open that copy up, because you won't be able to save the version you're filling in on Mr. Gon's website. You have to download it first. Just a small point of reference that's caught people out before when I've ran online games for them. So, can I assume that everyone in this group has access to the core book from which they want to make a character? Sebastian, I know I need to send you something to do with the Pure, so
yes.
I will do that. Anyone lacking that information?
I have the Changeling book. It is the PDF that I got as a backer. I don't know if they've made any alterations to it since then, but I'm sure they would be minor if they have.
Yeah, I don't believe so. So that's good. Okay then. Well, if you've got your character sheets up, then by all means start filling in the basic details. As you do so, Sebastian, if you could drop me your email address on the Discord, I will get you some documents. Well, a document that covers the Pure and specifically the Ivory Claws with some information you may need.
I'm so excited about this part because when you had the Q&A about it, I was freaking out a little bit, just fanboying very hard. So anyway.
Well, this all helps with play testing as well, believe me.
That's true, but
as always, have to recommend or have to request. Obviously, don't let any of this go outside of the group, any of the written content, although we can certainly talk about it. But it will build some anticipation for Shunned by the Moon as well, because that's where this information comes from. Now, for some of this character creation session, you're going to probably be working in silence, which isn't necessarily going to be interesting for listeners. So I'm going to jump between players every now and then and ask, what's your attribute assignment been? You do not need to break down every single stat the way I've done it on other actual plays. Is ask, where's your character strongest? Where is your character weakest? And do the same thing for skills too. What skills stand out for your character, which skills do not. When we start getting into their powers and things like that, that's where we're going to really want to focus on you talking about your character and why they have the powers they do and why they have the merits they do, because that tends to be what defines these characters a little more. So excuse me while I go silent for a second. I'm just going to be sending an email to Sebastian. We don't need background noise right now if you don't want, because I imagine you'll be filling in character sheets, but I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Okay, Sebastian, you should have now received your Ivory Claws information. There's a few pages of it. You're not going to need to use all of it because this is a starting level character, but hopefully that gives you some idea of how the Ivory Claws differ to Forsaken werewolves.
Okay.
So by all means, have a look through that now while other people are doing the attributes and skills. But in terms of your character's attributes and skills, that will be no different to any other Forsaken werewolf. So feel free to use a Werewolf of Forsaken character sheet.
Mm-hmm.
It mostly comes down to your gifts, basically, and your merits.
Okay. Oh, I see. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay. No, I'll shush until. Okay. I'll just. Yeah. No.
Yeah,
No.
enjoy reading.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, you have you have the first preview as a reader, as a player of Ivory Claw material.
I feel kind of bad about having like sort of like forcing. I didn't really force your hand. I mean, you chose to, but I still feel a bit guilty. Just.
Oh, I wouldn't feel too bad. You don't get to see the Fire Touched or the Predator Kings. I cut them out.
That's true. Oh, fair enough.
It's okay. I could have said I was really interested in playing a deviant and tried to.
Yeah, that wouldn't have happened.
I was about to say I don't think that's close enough. I don't think that's close enough to be a thing at this point.
Well, they're in Contagion Chronicle. We have an entire chapter which is very much deviant focused. Every single line has a chapter of focus to it. Well, a location. I think it'll all be in one very big chapter.
I am looking forward to Deviant, though. It seems very up my alley.
Yeah, a lot of people seem quite excited about it.
But Geist 2.0, now that's...
It surpassed expectations on Kickstarter, definitely.
I know.
Geist.
People had a lot of love for it, even though I don't think it got played all that much. I think a lot of people read it after the fact and went, "Oh, this could be an amazing game."
So, David, as we're talking right now, how are you getting on with your character sheet? What have you assigned your crumbling changeling?
Well, I gave him a first name, but not a last. I think I'm going to name him Connor. I have not figured out more than that name-wise. Other than that, I have so far assigned a needle and a thread. Concept is the most important. I'm actually waffling a bit on Court, and I don't think there's a kith that fits him in the book, because there's you know what I mean? Like the kits are somewhat limited. I know you can kind of make your own. There are rules for that. I have not bothered to look at that piece yet. I kind of looked at what there were and went, I don't think any of these particularly fit, and moved on to other things. As for Court, I honestly see Summer, Spring, and Autumn all fitting different aspects of his personality. The quick version of it is Spring does have the I want to celebrate and will refuse, and don't want to be the grindstone ever again. I want to enjoy this life that's been handed back to me. Where Summer has the I will not let anyone take this life from me. And Autumn has the all of that was incredibly scary. I need to have conquered that fear to move forward so that nothing can hold me in place again.
Let's start your character with a little bit of hope. I think Spring would be fun.
Yeah, it's that was the most obvious, which is usually the best choice when it comes to Court. So yeah, we'll go Spring. Okay. I have not actually assigned dots yet, but I'm definitely going physical attributes top.
Okay. All right. Well, in that case, I'll let you mute yourself while you do that.
Yeah.
And I'll jump over to Erica. How are you getting on with yours? What details have you given your character so far?
She's mostly fleshed out attribute and skill wise. She, as I mentioned, is physical primary. She's very dexterous, so where her physical skills are, larceny, stealth is her strong suits. I do have her Elpis and Torment figured out. She is pursuing love as her Elpis. She is not necessarily drawn to the romantic aspect of it, although that's not out of the question. It's mostly having been created as a program, having seen what people are willing to do for what they believe in. She wants something to believe in and someone to believe in. And she finds that most people are willing to do that for people that they quote unquote love. So she's very interested in what this love is and why it makes people do things. She's very logical, being a militant program. So when things are strange and crazy, she kind of falls back into the absence of love and emotion and thinks very much like a computer. So it should be interesting trying to be a dynamic character while also being very logical and not trying to think outside of a box. So,
okay, yeah, I like that. What sort of attribute spread are you thinking?
Right now, I'm thinking that she's physical primary. She's social tertiary. So her mental is somewhere in the middle. She is going to be more strong and dexterous than she has stamina. The dexterity comes into play mostly because that is the type of program she was designed to be. The strength comes from, the fact that she is an unfleshed Promethean in this machine-like body. So she's probably stronger than your average person. So.
Yeah, but she doesn't necessarily appear human, and although she desires human emotion and interaction, she's quite a way off yet.
Correct.
Okay, lovely. All right, I'll leave you to that. And how is our beast coming on?
Oh, well, I have attributes pretty well plotted out. Hunger was a big one, but I think that's very solidly in the Whispers camp. And I do have a legend in life as well. So a mental focus on the attributes for sure, kind of a even focus between intelligence and wits, but no more than average resolve. Social actually is a secondary, pursuing a social means to acquire the knowledge she's after is definitely going to be one of the common MOs. So having that as a secondary, specifically manipulation, because that plays into the legend that I'd like to look at. And the legend is actually going to be seductive, but it's not going to be the traditional physical seduction. It's the seductive nature of being able to know more, being able to know everything, offering knowledge as leverage to get people to reveal more of their own knowledge, that sort of thing. And then life I have as being cautious, being intimately familiar with the risks associated with pursuing supernatural knowledge, I think would leave a cautious core to all of her behaviors. That is going to be definitely something to occasionally fall back on, and something that would have carried over from her background before the Devouring, I think, is just a very cautious nature.
Okay, I like that as well. Excellent. Some interesting characters coming out here. All right, then. Well, I think you've pretty much answered the basic questions of how your character's building blocks are looking, so I'll leave you to that. And that takes us to Sebastian. How are you getting on? Are you still looking through your pure document?
I'm taking just a quick break to explain the attributes. So the social is primary. So 3 manipulation and composure, because he just seems like I don't want him to get rattled as easily, and he's kind of very good at schmoozing. He doesn't have as much presence as other werewolves might have because he's very unassuming. He's not physically striking to the sense that he'll you can just like look at him and be impressed by him, but he's kind of more glib, I guess. Secondary is mental, because I think he needs some intelligence and wits to actually investigate things, which is his pack job basically. And a fair amount of resolve, like that's the 3 points in resolve and 2 each in intelligence and wits. And for physical, it's just 1 in strength, 2 in dexterity, and 3 in stamina. Because I kind of figure that like ivory claws are big on kind of being stoic, like kind of like holding your pain and that kind of thing. So that seems to be fitting, I kind of assume.
Yeah, and to be honest, it's good to have another character, or have a character that isn't physical primary. Right now, the party balance, such as it is very much towards smashing things. Not true. Necessarily by choice.
He's the disappointment to the pack, because they kind of assume, oh, you know, werewolf, you know, you should be able to fight, but he's just like, no. I was a barista. I'm not picking up any sword anytime soon. So.
But when you shift,
that's true. He gets that. I mean, it's like a last second, like last resort, more or less. He's not interested in fighting immediately, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, all werewolves are pretty damn deadly. Well, as soon as they start shifting.
That's true.
So. Even if you look as weak as an old man. Okay, I'll leave you to it, because no doubt you'll have skills to do next. So feel free to mute yourself again.
I do have one question about, I'm a bit ahead with, like in the original pure book, you only get 2 gifts because you don't have the moon phase. So do I get 2 gifts as well, or is it 3 gifts with the new rules?
Let me just have a quick look. Good question.
I do like the aspects, like the which kind of step in for the auspices, but. I'm fine just having 2 gifts. Like I just want to do it properly.
Oh yeah, of course. I'm just refreshing myself. As you can imagine, I end up working on quite a few games, so keeping it all in my head at once can be a challenge.
How do you? I mean, that's just
a lot of post-it notes. Let's see. Okay, let's go with 2 gifts for now.
That's fair, yep.
I believe it's still that. Because, of course, you... I'm fairly certain it is 2. But if it turns out to be 3, I will check between sessions. If it turns out to be 3, I will just let you know, and you can pick a 3rd one. Easy as that.
In fairness, like I expect this to be more role-playing heavy anyway, so like the gifts aren't really what's going to make or break the story anyway, so it's fine. It's absolutely fine.
Oh, none of my games are roleplay heavy.
No, of course not. It's all just dice and numbers and who hits the hardest. Yeah, no, anyway, sorry.
It's all based around the fun of arithmetic. All right, I'll let you mute yourself while you're picking your way through that. And while everyone else is assigning things like skills and merits, merits tend to be the part of Chronicles of Darkness characters that take the longest, mainly because with the Chronicles of Darkness book and the Splat book, as they're sometimes called, there's often quite a few to choose from, but you never know. These players might already have merits in mind and just go bang, bang, bang and pick them. While you're all looking at your character sheets, I'll talk a little about the Contagion Chronicle itself and what the game is about. So for anyone unaware who is in this group or who's watching because you're on the Discord, the Contagion Chronicle, or the Contagion, is an expansion of a concept that was first introduced in the Horror Recognition Guide for Hunter the Vigil, first edition. This may be a book you own, you may never have read it. Specifically, there is a chapter in the Horror Recognition Guide that is, I believe, called Interstitial Terrain. It's where a hunter starts seeing things leaking through from another alien world or another reality, and it basically drives him mad. It's about as Lovecraftian and weird. In fact, Lovecraftian isn't even the right word for it. It is just purely weird and horrific, utterly terrifying. And I've ran a number of Hunter the Vigil games using that. You walk down the wrong alley and boom, you're in another world. And Cult Divinity Lost is very much that kind of game too. Now, when it came to pitching Contagion Chronicle, writing the outline for it, that was the angle I wanted to go for. That vampires and werewolves and all the rest can get quite complacent in their culture, in their structure. The fact that so many of these creatures are long-lived, and because they've hidden in secret for so long, it means they have quite strictly codified rituals and hierarchies and so on. So what happens when all of those things get shaken up? It's an easy conceit, the idea of what happens when a meteor is about to hit the Earth. Everything changes. But if something's a little more subtle, the example I often give is what happens to the vampire if all the blood you drink suddenly starts tasting like acid and having that effect, and it burns your mouth? What are you going to do? What happens to a werewolf when all of their wolf-blooded companions, their family, just stop recognizing them, when their pack abandons them? What happens with a mage when their magic just doesn't work the way it used to, or when the idea of using magic blatantly, breaking out and throwing fireballs around like a D&D wizard is suddenly okay in this particular city, and people accept it as part of their reality? It's a reality shift, a paradigm shift, if you like. And that is basically what Contagion is. Your world starts decaying or becoming poisoned or just changing. The central concept of Contagion Chronicle is change. And for supernatural creatures, or basically anyone who can identify the supernatural, change is terrifying, because people like to live their lives with certain pillars of ineffable truths. Even hunters, if they think, okay, I know what a vampire is now, I know what their strengths are, I know what their weaknesses are, if they suddenly encounter new vampires with new weaknesses or no weaknesses and new strengths, it completely changes everything. And Contagion can be changed on an incredibly minor scale through to a hugely major one. And that's what this book, Contagion Chronicle, basically is. You have lots of different locations throughout it. In one of them, the basic change is you have a preacher whose words, he's mortal. He was a hunter at one point, but his words, which probably used to speak with the power of endowments, are now dread powers. And he can enthrall people with the snap of his fingers or just the command of his voice. And he can poison their minds with the sing-song of his words. And he can make them all hosts for Contagion, which he believes is a divine power from the angel he's unearthed from the soil, which is a discarded piece of the God Machine, an actual angel. And he's picked the Contagion up from this angel's remains, and now he is basically a vessel for Contagion. Now, everyone in his congregation is a vessel for him, and they will then spread the Contagion to the other people in town, and so on and so on. But it's quite localized through to another location where the entire city is already infected with Contagion. And in this case, it's not a contagion of fanaticism or zeal, which is what the preacher has. It's a contagion of emotion, like depression. where people just stop caring, where hope becomes a thing of the past, where suicide rates skyrocket and fertility just rapidly drops. It may immediately feel like this kind of thing wouldn't have an effect on the supernatural, but where Prometheans are constantly looking for hope, and where vampires are constantly looking for blood and replenishment of their blood supplies and all of the rest, as soon as these things start affecting mortals en masse, their worlds change and they have to do something about it. There are contagions in this game that directly affect supernatural creatures. The one that's been spoken about most is the Garayo strain, which is also shunned by the moon for Wealth the Forsaken, where an ancient form of predator that Father Wolf probably tried to create at some point starts infecting shapeshifters in Kyoto, Japan. And instead of just shifting between human and wolf, they are now shifting between having multiple limbs, multiple heads, tentacles where their legs should be. They basically become mutant predators. And at some point, the shifting power just stops or becomes uncontrollable. And so on. Contagion is therefore change of expectation, change of ability, and changing of the world entire. These things can expand, if you like, in your chronicle to consume the entire world and therefore change your chronicles of darkness. Or they can be the kinds of things that your characters fight against, and that's where the protagonists in Contagion Chronicle come from. As you become members of these groups called the Sworn or the False. The Sworn are divided into 5 factions, the False are divided into 3 factions. And in simple terms, the Sworn are trying to fight against Contagion, or at the very least study it. The False are often trying to weaponize it, or sometimes speed it up. You will even have creatures like the Pure or the Schwanksen from Mummy or the Strix, who may well fall into a faction alongside their usual enemies, because when it comes to something like this, the Aslu hardening the gauntlet in the nearby area is a petty threat compared to what the Contagion is capable of doing. So that may see the Pure aligning, well, an Ivory Claw aligning with a Stormlord, at least for a week. And once the problem is sorted, then they'll go back to their usual conflicts. So that's what the Contagion Chronicle is. When we actually start our chronicle up, we will probably see our characters in their normal habitat. Things will be normal, and then something will start to change. And it's not a big spoiler for me to say that. What that thing will be the surprise. And how you react to it will be the fun. And then how your characters act together to combat it, weaponize it, research it, keep it penned, quarantined, kill everyone around it, kill everyone infected, try and save everyone who's infected. That will be where the story comes in. So I've been rattling on for that long about the Contagion Chronicle to give you enough time to actually fill in some of your character sheet. So hopefully you've not just been listening wrapped to my voice. But if you have, you've now got a bit longer, well, unless you're David, because I'm going to go over to you, David, and find out what you've been doing with your skills, and if you've got to them, your merits.
I have. I have, in fact, done so. So with my skills, I went physical, mental, social. I have focused as a person who has generically done very little with their life, as that was kind of where he was at. So, I took some athletics, a little bit of brawl. I took a decent amount of weaponry because he's going to take elemental weapon to at least be, feel like he's useful. That's been one of the things he's done within Changelings. You've been turned into a man made of stone. You might as well take some advantage of that. Haven't put anything in larceny or firearms because firearms never impressed him, and larceny just isn't the type of character. I put mental. I went across a few things, a tiny bit of academics, tiny bit of computer. If you don't have a dot in computer and you are, your character is under the age of 40, it's a little confusing. I did put a skill specialty of architecture in crafts because I figure if you've been made of stone, you should know a little bit about how things are built at this point. I felt like crafts would fit architecture the best. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe under academics instead. I was unsure. Just a very basic social layout. When you're putting 4 points in things, you take one dot and a bunch of things that make basic sense for you to do. Not no streetwise, no subterfuge. He's a fairly straightforward person.
Okay. Yeah, I've not got an issue with you taking academics if you want. I think academics is a pretty broad skill that you can apply to literal book learning and university study, or something. You can have it as accumulated common sense knowledge. So tell me again how you would, because you mentioned academics, how you would apply it for your character.
So academics would specifically be, for this guy, book learning. His entire, up until he was captured, his entire life was generic. He went to college, he got a bachelor's degree in communications. He then got a job as a, retail clerk and ended up a retail manager. Like it was, everything was very, nose to the grindstone, nothing really special. So the academics would just be the background of went to school, studied, got his grades. And I was thinking of putting a skill specialty in architecture somewhere because he is made of stone and now understands how things are built a lot better. But I'm not sure if I put that on the craft side or on the academic side, because I don't think academically he knows architecture. I feel like it's almost the old school dwarven, like D&D, like stone sense. We're going down, I can tell. So I was thinking that might actually fit in crafts as a specialty.
Yeah, I see. I really like the idea of it suddenly appearing in your academics just based on what you are. But at the same time, well, essentially your character gets spat out through the hedge, or you escape, or what have you, and immediately it is very much a Neo moment of I know kung fu, and but at the same time, there's something pleasant about an instinctive knowledge, just because you are essentially a being of concrete and rebar, of having that craft. Because, so I guess there's getting into minutiae of skills a little. Academics is the understanding of it, craft is the application of it, but I don't like to be that granular when it comes to skills. So you can put it into whichever one you want, and when you actually come to use it, I would say that you can use that specialty. It makes sense. You're not going to need to buy that specialty twice, for instance.
Right, got it. Okay. I was also, and I'll take advice on this, I feel like, once again, being made of rock and having, spent so much time literally under the grind, both in the real world and in Arcadia, a stamina-related athletics specialty makes sense, but I cannot think of one that fits. Like an endurance type of specialty. I know it's probably not a specialty that will come up all the time, but skill specialties to me are like they represent something important about that character that they've spent a lot of time on, whether they're going to get rolled a lot or not.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I could put that aside and think about it. Like skill specialties are like the least important piece.
Yeah, let's think about let's think about that. It's a good question. I'm struggling to think of the exact word I would use. I mean, endurance may well be it, although that more speaks to the ability to run a marathon or something like that. I guess I'm more looking at it in a sort of steadfast way.
Yeah, it's a toughness, it's a hardiness, it's a steadfast works. I like steadfast.
Oh, let's go for that then.
Yeah, I like that.
Are you on merits yet?
I am.
Oh, okay. And what merits did you go for?
Okay, so I currently have done almost all. I'm not all the way. I spent 5 points to up my word. Is it word or weird?
I've always said weird.
Okay, I assumed it was weird, but some people pronounce things weird. We won't talk about some of the vampire clan names. So I spent 5 points there, which made merits easier. I have a feeling I may mess with merits a little bit more at the end, but so I have 4 points spent of the 5 remaining that I have. 1 point into having a small hollow. I think there's actually one of the example hollows is the Shadow Garden, and I really like it.
Mm-hmm.
If you aren't familiar with that one off the top of your head, it pretty much just means you have a garden in the hedge that is a safe place that you go to that grows it grows goblin fruit that aren't normal goblin fruit. They don't affect you eat them there and they work for food, but they don't do the normal goblin fruit things.
Mm. Expect to find a friendly beast sitting in there at some point eating your goblin fruit.
And the second one I took was Goblin Bounty, to give me regular access to goblin fruit. It felt like it made sense with the garden. On my way to the garden, near the garden, there's things I can take out of there. I took the 1 dot of the Elemental Warrior style because it fits with, having learned to fight. I actually don't think the first dot or 2 do a whole ton, but it makes sense. And I took 1 dot of the Spring Mantle because I embracing spring is important.
I completely agree. Okay,
so
then.
I'm a dot short at the moment, but I'm figuring out the final dot there.
All right, lovely. So yeah, if you do that, then by all means move straight on to your changeling powers.
Yep, I will.
So how's our Promethean coming?
I think she's going pretty well. I have most of her finer details figured out. I'm working on her transmutations. I have her merits figured out and her attribute and skills spread. So she's coming along.
Wow, okay. What are the highlights and lowlights on your character then?
So as said before, being the militant program, being the dexterous infiltrator, she definitely has her highest points in larceny and stealth. She also does fairly well with computer. She has a specialty in hacking in computer. That is her highest mental skill. It came in a lot of handy as a program. It comes in a lot of handy with her trying to, barter information as one of those broker type deals. So that comes in handy. She does have a specialty in pistols. She wasn't necessarily heavily combat trained, but being a military program, they are expected to be able to protect their own assets. So she would have been given some way to defend herself, and that has carried over into a traditional firearm specialty. She isn't terribly social. She doesn't really have to be. She's sneaky and gets what she wants that way. She is decently good at subterfuge, specifically when it comes to maintaining her cover as, somebody who is not an automated machine and who actually could pass for human, because that's the point of being this military infiltration program, is no one wants to, ask too many questions. So she's fairly decent at that. That's mostly the highlights of her skills. So that's mostly the highlights of her skills.
And what about merits?
Merits, her highest investment in merits is 3 dots in resources, actually, which she manages to get by trading this information that she is skilled to get. She isn't very sociable. She doesn't have a lot of job experience. So she breaks into government buildings and gets people secrets, and whoever pays the most money, hey, that's cool. So she's pretty well off. She doesn't really know what people do with money, but she's got a lot of it. So there's that. She has 2 dots in the defender merit, specifically because she is trying to figure out how to be a person while using empathy as that tool. She wants to get these connections to people that are so important to her that she would, go out of her way to defend them. So I invested some in that. The eidetic memory merit for 2 dots, because she is that program specifically designed for information infiltration. So she has that. It made most sense. She does have loaded for bear and trigger discipline, both, again, not necessarily combat heavy, but combat, ready. And quick draw as well for the pistols. So she's not terribly combat trained, but she can hold her own, which is good if she ever gets caught. Hopefully she doesn't, but if she does, she's prepared.
Sounds like she's escaped from Westworld, which
which could be fun. I like Westworld.
Oh, excellent. No, I like that a lot. So, that gives us, despite the fact we've got 2 physical primary characters, they do feel very different. So I like that a lot. And also, it's always helpful to have someone with a deep cache of resources. So you're the bank for the group by the sound of it. And what about our beast?
So skills and merits fairly fleshed out at this point. Mental primary on the skills with a very heavy investment on both academics and occult. Those are 4 dots each with a specialty. The idea with a lot of these mental things is there's a lot of theoretical knowledge, but not a lot of practical application. So she has those investments in academics and occult, nothing in politics, medicine, science, nothing in crafts, a little bit in investigation, a little bit in computer, 2 dots in each of those, but very much a theoretical knowledge and not practical application necessarily. Occult can kind of go both ways. That would be the area that she'd be most comfortable operating in. Mm-hmm. But that's where we have the mental for physical for something completely different from what we had before. Physical is the tertiary. 2 dots in athletics, because I did have this character envisioned as someone who had actually started out as a hunter before her devouring. And that kind of lifestyle is going to lead to a level of activity that I think a couple dots in athletics is appropriate. I also put a single dot in firearms and a single dot in larceny, just to kind of reflect on that history, although those skills are really not being maintained at this point, as her nature has taken her elsewhere. For social, sorry.
No, I was just thinking, I suppose sometimes she's going to be getting her hands a little dirty in the pursuit of these secrets.
Yeah, and that's larceny will come a little bit in handy there, and firearms if he needs to make a show of waving a gun around. For social, a couple dots in empathy, which circles back around to a little bit of the focus I had in manipulation, just understanding how to get the secrets that she wants from people and what secrets and knowledge that they might want in turn. So 2 dots there. A single dot in persuasion, not very persuasive, very much lost in her head and in theories, but does occasionally practice the persuasive arts. Socialize, I have 2 dots in, as well as subterfuge, a couple dots in those, and both of those are kind of the blending in, acting like you belong. Socialize is a little bit higher because when she can pull her head out of the library, she does enjoy being around people and participating in general social situations, just kind of to unplug from the very goal-oriented nature of her hunger. For subterfuge, I have a couple dots as well. I have a specialty in there. I'm not really sure if I should move that somewhere else. I feel like it would probably be somewhere else because it doesn't tie in very well to her concept. But the specialty I have right now in subterfuge, I couldn't think of a better way to phrase it, kind of like acting like you belong. Grabbing a hard hat and a clipboard and walking on to a business site and just walking past security and grabbing the information you need.
Yeah, I suppose I would consider that, if I was to synopsize that in one word that doesn't really exist, it would be something like chameleoning.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very good.
But I quite like that because it's approaching the subterfuge and blending in with humanity in a very different way to how our Promethean is. But I can imagine the two of them are going to have some common ground in basically discussing, so how do you do it? What do you have that I don't? And yeah, I think that will lead to some nice role play. What about your character's merits?
To start with, I have encyclopedic knowledge with a focus on the occult skill, just for the random bits of trivia picked up either from her library or history as a former brief tenure as a hunter. Interdisciplinary specialty and area of expertise, both focused on her research specialty and academics to allow her to employ that with other skills where it makes sense, and to get a little bit of an extra bonus out of that. And then from there, I took a lot of lair-focused merits, some from the Player's Guide for Beast. So well-stocked lair, which lets me dedicate a chamber in the lair to a couple of other merit dots, and I'm actually turning those into library. So the idea, I think, is actually having the heart of her lair be this kind of occult library, where she both brings back the secrets she's found before and others that were, potentially already dwelling in the astral. Connected layer, which allows the layer to interface with the digital communication systems, I guess, of the mortal world, even though it's not actually on the same plane of existence. I'm not quite sure how I want that to work yet. In theory, though, you pick up a cell phone and you can call someone from within the layer, which is neat. But it would also be cool to see some kind of thing where, if she's in this occult library, she pulls something out and writes out a message on a piece of paper, and then in the physical world, someone gets a text message with that message as part of an equivalent. Though that's more of a fluff differentiation than anything else. Then I added actually an extra. So the well-stocked layer, I devoted to library related to the occult skill, and then put another dot of my actual merits in that. So that brings it up to 3 total.
I know I know this gets into very much the fluff of the situation, but how do you imagine your beast's occult lair looking? Because I'm always interested to hear when people are playing beasts, they always have interesting ideas about how their lairs appear.
Yeah, so I very much see it almost being a labyrinth of stacks of books, very on the surface, very disorganized. The stacks kind of form arcane geometries that don't make a lot of sense necessarily to the naked eye. Not enough to have any kind of mechanical effect, but to be a little disorienting. But labyrinthine would be a really good way to describe it, and it's just is difficult to make sense of or map out in your head. I have a couple ideas for lair traits to do some more interesting things with that library angle. I'll have to look at those a little further, but that's a high-level overview. I'd say that very maze-like, very difficult to comprehend, and instead of being surrounded by walls and a ceiling, it's just stacks of books or manuscripts or scrolls or all of these repositories of knowledge all around you.
Very nice. Okay, so finishing off your merits, what else did you purchase?
The last bit there, I actually am looking at the advanced library merit, which allows you to have some more specialized knowledge on specific occult subjects. And I'm not sure where to focus this. I had considered a background as a hunter, as I mentioned, but specifically as a mentor of the Lucifuge. So I have no idea if I'm saying that right, by the way.
I always call it Lucifuge. So
demonology made sense for that one. I would love to be able to take the Contagion as another one, but that might be starting with too advanced a level of knowledge for what we're intending for the campaign. But I have a few other ideas for what I could do for a second topic there.
Maybe rather than go for the Contagion, go for the God Machine.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But feel free to call it something else. From your beast's perspective, you may not know it as the God Machine. You might know it as the Lattice or the Web or something like that. but I think having it as an occult specialization could be useful to this chronicle.
Sure thing.
Okay, then. So that just leaves us with werewolf, and then we'll come around for one last loop, which should be everyone's supernatural powers. And unbelievably, that means we will have had a party's character creation done within 2 hours, which, considering everybody is making a character of a different type, is pretty unlikely or pretty uncommon. The one thing I will say, and this is something we won't do in this immediate character creation session, what I want everyone in this group to do between now and the next session is we will work in text on sort of working out your characters, family, friends, touchstones, anything equivalent that will appear as supporting characters in this game, rather than coming up with them on the fly in this character creation session. We will have a think about them over the next week or so, and that will help us build a nice roster. And that means when we come into the next session, we can introduce our characters, where they sit in their little web of contacts, and then we can roll from there. So, Sebastian, your werewolf.
Right, so for the mental skills, I have one for academics, because I figured he kind of just went to university, like just, he was kind of, I guess, raised sort of like fairly middle class, so he's had just the average education, like he's not anything spectacular. And then investigation, he has 3 dots, and it's got a specialization in supernatural investigation, because it's sort of, whenever there's like a supernatural sighting or some kind of thing in the news, his pack kind of sends him out to check if it's actually anything noteworthy or not. So I figured that would be a good place to put the dots. He has got 2 in occult, which again goes in with like cryptic sightings and ghost sightings, that sort of thing. And 1 in politics. I think he's aware of like both human and werewolf politics, but he doesn't dabble. He's just aware of it, basically. In physical, he has I've not decided yet whether to put 2 in brawl and 1 in 2 in brawl and 2 in stealth, or 1 in brawl and 3 in stealth. He's been in a fight once, so he's sort of, well, not a fight. He got hospitalized, so it's more kind of like a one-sided fight. I think he would have taken like a self-defense classes, so he would have at least a dot in brawl. I don't know if they would really justify having 2, and 1 in survival. In social, it's 1 in animal ken. He's always been kind of just good with animals, but not kind of like training animals kind of thing. 2 in empathy, 2 expression, 1 intimidation, 3 in persuasion, which again is the kind of glib charm and ingratiation kind of specification. 1 in socialize and 1 in subterfuge.
Okay, we're seeing a nice smattering of subterfuge among the entire group. So this is going to be a lovely band of liars.
Basically, yes. I think I mean that's the sort of like entertaining part, is that I've put 1 dot in allies, because I like the idea of him having friends with some fire touch who are kind of interested in his interest in the spirit world, but they're not fond of his methods, because I mean, for obvious reasons. He's sneaky and a liar by what he does. So they like his interests, but they don't like his methods, kind of thing. So
you're a loose cannon, a maverick.
I mean,
a wild card.
As much as you can be if you're, pure. They don't really let you go off to as much as you'd like, but yeah.
Okay then. All right. So yeah. So have you spent all of your merit points?
I'm still kind of unsure. So is the strong bloodline that it was like a merit point in the original Purebrook, is that still a thing that's necessary in the overhauled one, or is it just sort of assumed that he has one?
I think it's assumed that he has one by being a member of the Ivory Claws. For the time being, any merits that aren't in the Wealth of Forsaken Core book You will also be looking at any merits. I think I provided you with some merits, haven't I, for
Yes,
Ivory Claws?
but they do require like a higher score in Primal Urge most of the time, which I haven't put any points towards. So
I think to get a bit of fun out of your character, let's put a few points in Primal Urge.
okay, that's gonna be
After all,
interesting.
you want to be using some of your characters' fun little merits. I feel very evil saying that, but at the very least, having something like Refinement of Flesh.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you can see, Purity is one of the Ivory Claws. There's quite a lot of purity-based gifts that an Ivory Claw can take, I should say. So by all means, if that's the kind of character you want to play, I'd go for those gifts when you get to that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Otherwise, I put in like I said, like the dot in allies, which sort of just I guess like a local pack or at least smattering of fire touched, because I'm pretty sure the Predator Kings are nowhere near Wellington. I mean, if they're anywhere in New Zealand, they're not near the cities. That makes no sense. I mean, they might, but they won't be having a good time. He has direction sense, because I thought that would, since he's investigating and kind of just scouting a lot, it seemed reasonable. I put Eye for the Strange because kind of I like the idea again of him being able to spot whether something is kind of not necessarily like knowing immediately, knowing right away what it is, but knowing that there's something supernatural going on. I put one in Mentor, like the idea of him having one kind of just at least one kind of like Ivory Claw who's kind of teaching him the ropes, more or less.
Yeah.
And I put 2 in Resources, like the idea that he's kind of like he's stepped up like by 1, like he's sort of like he's had like a normal income, and now he's got a slightly better income, but he's not really doing as well as he'd like yet.
Yeah.
And for the rest, I was sort of like I was mentioning I kind of want him to have a personal totem, and I'm not sure how many dots. Should I put 3 dots for that, like for the base for the base personal one?
Yeah, let's go for that.
Yeah.
What are you thinking your personal totem will be? What is a manifestation of?
Okay, this is sort of where I will sort of preface it by saying, "Hear me out," because
okay,
it's nothing. I mean, so in his human life, he was sort of like a discreet but openly gay man, and since he's had his first change and been sort of explained that he's part of this tribe, which sort of focuses on like good breeding and breeding, it's sort of that's an issue. So he's not out to his pack or to his elders, and the totem would be like a kind of like a personification. Well, it's more. It takes the shape of like a small cat, basically like an alley cat. Which has sort of been following him even as human, like in the there's a city block in Wellington. I googled it, which is sort of like got all the gay clubs and bars and everything. So this spirit is more of a like young personification of all the positive elements of that area, but also kind of demands that if somebody asks you, like the ban is that if somebody asks you, are you gay, then you can't say no, like you have to say yes, otherwise you will lose the spirit forever, basically. So you can't openly deny who you are, but in return it's sort of more of a, I guess, like a boost in confidence, boost in how you present yourself, sort of thing.
Okay, so it's almost your pride.
In a way, yeah, I can figure that, yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Oh, I like that. We'll work on it. We'll refine it a little, but I like it as a concept.
Oh, good, because I was sort of concerned about the idea of like just my totem is a small cat and it's a gay cat.
Oh no.
But anyway, but
I honestly no issue with the way it manifests, and yes, certainly nothing wrong with if there's a central struggle within your character over his sexuality. I
mean, he's sort of at the point where he's willing to kind of like tell the other like ivory claws. Like he's willing to procreate, but he's not willing to actually like marry someone and kind of like make a lifestyle out of it, basically. And he's concerned about them not taking that very well, which is probably he's right to be concerned about it or not. I mean, who knows? It's kind of up to you as to how they would react to somebody being
Well, we shall see. I like that as a bit of personal drama. I'm sure we will handle it with all the gravitas that's needed, but
That's
I
fair enough.
appreciate you doing that. Okay, so next time we come over to you, Sebastian, I will expect you to have all your final werewolf traits assigned.
Yeah.
But,
So how much more do you want me to put into Primal Urge?
well, that is up to you. I would recommend
Okay,
having at least 2 in there, though, so you can access at least one of the...
Is there any way that, I mean, I kind of, since I want him to be fairly obsessed with the spirit world, can I take one off of Harmony so he can step into the spirit world more easily?
Yeah, let's do that.
Thank you. All right. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go over to David now. So, finishing touches then, David, on your changeling. And any outstanding questions, Sebastian, if you could mute yourself again, please.
Oh, sure, sorry.
So actually, I want to go back to a thing that I hadn't noticed real quick,
Mm-hmm.
and that is I forgot that I got the mantle point free because I was in I'm in the spring court, so I actually had 2 merit points to spend. So I would like to hand it off to you, not right now, if you are willing, because this is something I really enjoy doing. I've put 2 points into token, and I don't care what happens with that.
Okay.
If that's something you're willing to do, I rather enjoy saying, "Oh, I found a thing that does a thing."
Yeah.
Letting
So you want me to introduce the wild card to your character?
Absolutely. And I only put 2 points into it, so it's not going to be the deck of many things that blows up the world. So,
well, it might be half a deck of a few things. A bag of holding with a hole in it.
And I also did go ahead and do. I did go ahead and do powers.
Okay, you've done your powers. So which powers have you gone ahead with?
So I've gone ahead with elemental weapon because that was pretty obvious. The ability to pull a weapon of my element or of other elements. From the pull the proverbial sword from the stone. It's the sword made of stone, but it works. I went with as my second regalia, I went with shield. Because protecting is as important to him as attacking. In fact, in some ways more so.
Okay.
So I went with Fey Cunning, which is it's mostly combat. It's it gets you faster. It makes it harder for you to be hit. That kind of stuff. I went with Shared Burden. Which is a healing power that allows you to pour your blood out, or in this case, my essence, the dust, out into people to hurt yourself, to heal others. That's just a very... It feels like the kind of thing that he would be perfectly fine with. And for the last one, I went with Spring's Kiss, which is a power with very rarely any practical need to use it, but he adores it, and I adore it in that he obviously loves the rain, and Spring's Kiss allows you to summon the rain within like a mile radius of yourself for just a little bit of glamour. And it has some practical purpose. You can do a downpour, you can end up inflicting the heavy rain tilt on people. Like there are good reasons to do it, but honestly, when he found out spring could bring the rains, like that's a power he had to learn, because he loves the rain, and being able to make it rain on demand was something I couldn't not add on here.
No, I like it. It's to be honest, I like it when a character has a power that doesn't necessarily jive with the core concept, because it's always fun when that power sees use. So, are there any other gaps on your sheet right now?
Nope, I don't believe so. I added a couple future ideas, just to letting you know for my sheet. I have a few I put a tagline above it says future ideas, so I put a couple more contracts I might pick up someday, but they're under a future ideas, so don't think that I have them. I have to fill in my like seeming blessings, and if we want to make a kith that fits me at some point, we'll have to deal with that. But that's not something we need to do right now.
That's perfect. We probably don't need a kith.
I don't see a reason why it's needed.
No, and to be honest, if the game goes that way, you could find yourself, joining one. But for the time being, we can go without. Okay, then. Well, in that case, thank you very much. And Erica?
Okay, so I have her finished. We still need to talk about her lineage, which is unfleshed. I think I did mention that. Her refinement is ferrum, this refinement of iron. She is in the role of soldier currently. She's very much about, again, learning not only how to care for people, but how to protect those connections. So she's very much about making sure that she is doing what she can in the most efficient way possible to get that done. Her refinement condition is tenacious, which is pretty cool. She can add the highest of her resolve, stamina, or composure to the number of rolls allowed on an extended action. And because she has vitality as a transmutation, specifically the Umbowed Elembek, I have no idea how to pronounce that. She can add her Azoth skill to her resolve, so that adds 3 to any number of extended action rolls, which is pretty cool. Her bestowment is the soul is in the software, which is also really cool. I think it's really cool anyway. And it means that her body is made up of nanobots in this case, and by spending a point of pyro, she can break off a smaller part of her body, which then goes and acts as if it has all of her attributes -1, except intelligence. It has no intelligence. It will protect itself. It will feed itself. One of the cooler things is that because it's a swarm, it only takes 1 point of damage from any attack that affects an area. And I thought that was pretty cool. She is also the corporeum transmutation. As somebody who is very much into being the most effective machine she can be at this point, that gives her things like athletic grace, uncanny dexterity, and rarefied grace, which buffs up her dexterity skills. Like, I think it's kind of mind-blowing. She gets +1 to effective dexterity, 9 again to dexterity rolls, road action to dexterity rolls. So she's she's pretty dexterous. And I think that's it. I think that is most of what I still had to go over with her.
Yeah, that sounds like a complete Promethean you have created appropriately enough. And I've always said alembic. So,
it sounds more. Honestly, it rolls off the tongue easier too. I like that.
I couldn't tell you for certainty.
We'll just go with it and just pretend that's how it's always been.
Yeah. Okay, and is our primordial concluded as well?
Yes, I think so. So a little bit of extra flavor context to my power choices. The horror itself occupying this beast I'm going to refer to as the grimoire. And as far as imagery goes, most people are probably familiar with the imagery of like a humanoid that's made up of a swarm of insects, for example. I think it's fairly common in a lot of media where it's not like, or nanobots in this case, but where it's not really a solid, but it's a group, an aggregation of smaller individuals making a humanoid form. The grimoire is similar, except it's not insects or nanobots. It's words and letters in languages that don't exist or don't exist anymore, or maybe never existed. Kind of like a language of horror given form, essentially forming the physical body of this horror. That said, at this point, that body is still cohesive enough to not look at the infestation atavism yet, although it is on my get as soon as possible list, but there are a couple others that just seemed much more in theme to me. So the first one is Alien Mindset from the Player's Guide. It's an Nguma atavism, so tied directly to her family, which makes it very difficult for anyone to follow her thought processes or discern her motives. It'll apply a penalty equal to her layer, so just -1 for now at the normal effect, and inflict the confused condition at times if they suffer a dramatic failure attempting to manipulate or question her. At low satiety, it gets very interesting because at that point, she gains the ability to essentially lie even to supernatural powers that are attempting to discern her aspirations, life, legend, or hunger. And mundane attempts as well, but to basically provide false information to anything that's attempting to learn this information. And then with the satiety expenditure on that, she gains the ability to temporarily adopt a different hunger. So if in the pursuit of the contagion, things take a less cerebral turn, she could adopt a hunger for prey, for example, as they go hunt down something that's infected, and satisfy hunger that way. The second atavism I chose, and I have no idea how to say this, but I'm going to try, is Mimir's Wisdom.
No, that's correct.
So it's from the Anakim. It grants eidetic memory, which I think is appropriate. It also allows her to automatically see through any mundane attempts to deceive her. It doesn't reveal the truth, but just lets her know there's some sort of deception going on. And lets me make a leap of logic once per chapter. Nothing that ever identifies a specific person, but can answer circumstantial questions like, where is this thing? Or similar. And then at the low satiety, which I think will be interesting to see how this interacts with the hunger for secrets specifically, but it allows the beast to know one damning fact about anyone with whom they come into physical contact, but it has to be something that they can use to feed, which in this case, secrets ideally related to the supernatural, but not necessarily. And it as well empowers some mental skills at low satiety. So that's it for atavisms. I looked at nightmares as well. So there's one nightmare in the Player's Guide, and I actually have to look up what the actual name of it is. Let me find it, because I wanted to kind of refluff the name for something more appropriate. So the nightmare is called You Can't Dig It Out, but it represents this paranoia and fear, and inflicts this on others, that there's something in your body, like the classic alien abduction. They've put a chip in your body, now they're tracking you or whatever, and it makes them sick, or at high satiety or satiety expenditure will even actively harm themselves trying to claw it out of their body. So I wanted to look at that and kind of refluff it a little bit and say, instead of you can't dig it out, it's you're infected by the knowledge. So you've learned something that you shouldn't, and you can't get it out of your head. And it's the exact same mechanical effects. It makes you a little sick, or at the higher levels, you actively harm yourself trying to get this knowledge, whatever it is you think you know, out of your head. And then the second one, and this touches a little bit on connections, but I did want to take a kinship nightmare for the second one, because there's one that very, very well fits the concept. It's a mage kinship, actually, so it wouldn't be for any of the other players. And I was considering a rival knowledge seeker, not necessarily a friendly relationship, but not a hostile one, but maybe someone with whom she has competed in the past to gain arcane secrets. But the nightmare itself is called Everything You Know Is a Lie, which lets you inflict doubt on people to the point that they lose access to specialties or to 10 again. Basically takes all of the skills that the target is really good at and makes them not good at that, because they begin to doubt that they were ever good at it in the first place. And I think that really plays into the knowledge manipulation part of the concept.
Yeah, very much so.
So I'd like to play around with that a little bit. I did decide on layer traits, and there are a couple that reflect the kind of arcane geometries that I'm looking at. but I don't know if they're extreme enough to represent the lair trait, and there are some that are much more present, and there's one that I think I can do something really cool with. But the first one is poor lighting. The arcane occult library that the Grimoire resides in is in a perpetual state of twilight. It's very dark. It's difficult to read until you're just tunnel visioning on whatever text you happen to be reviewing, and then it kind of consumes all of your attention, and suddenly it's not so hard anymore. But the default state in there is definitely a state of twilight. And then what I'd like to do for the second lair trait, actually only gets 2 starting at lair 1, is I was looking at the corrosive trait, but with a very particular manifestation, with my thought being that not only is the horror very hungry for knowledge and secrets, but so is the lair itself. And so when people get too close to one of these stacks of books, it begins to kind of eat at them. And so they take gradual damage over time, or objects, people or objects. But a fun twist, I don't know that it would be anything we could use practically because it's not part of the lair trait. But if the damage that they take to themselves or to an object over time then becomes knowledge that's stored in the library. And it doesn't even have to be legible. It could be in a language that no one can read, so it's not actually useful to someone. But this idea of spending too much time in this lair, gradually reducing you down to essentially just a story that's in this library that's forgotten. In the case of if you stay there long enough that it actually kills you. But taking a person and turning them into nothing more than their component data or story, narrative, what have you, I think is very appropriate and could be very fun to play around with.
Oh yeah, that will be a lovely feature. It's one of the best things about lairs is when you really start thinking about how they might work. Now I'm going to have a think about that and whether it's justifiable at the starting level.
Sure.
But I think we could probably swing that. After all, it's more for the narrative fun of it. I'm not going to have a chief antagonist stumble into your lair and then turn into a book ignominiously. I could do it with a lot of ceremony, but I wouldn't make it a passive thing. But yeah, I like that. Okay, then. I think that's your character, isn't it?
Yeah, that is it.
So that just leaves us with our werewolf.
Yes. And so we're talking about the blood, bone, and that all that stuff, or.
Mm-hmm.
So the blood. I mean, so technically he's repressing so much that he has a kind of. I think he's repressing too much to the point where his blood is monster. Like when it gets too much, like he just goes completely like blood hungry berserk, which is terrifying, obviously. And he doesn't want to be going berserk, but it just kind of happens. And for the bone, it's lone wolf because he does appreciate working with the pack, but like I said, he's trying to prove himself, and kind of prove that he can do things by himself without help from other people more, I suppose. So, hang on. For the what else do you want to go into? I'm sorry.
So we need to find out what supernatural gifts and any other werewolf-related powers that you have.
Oh, right. The gifts are both from. One of them is from the file you sent me. So should I just mention that now, or should I just?
Please.
Oh, it's a gift of agony. It's called Rack, which basically him touching or hitting anything will cause more pain and more damage, essentially. And I think it levels with his cunning renown. If I'm gonna check back, because he seems like he seems the type to be kind of gaining more cunning renown than anything else, because he's more of a scout, investigator type. So he's not getting a lot of glory or honor out of it at all. And the other one is a dominance gift called Primal Allure, which is just sort of making him more charismatic, kind of in the moment, ideally. Yeah. And those are the two ones. So
yeah, I think that's your character built, unless there's some other part of the character sheet I'm forgetting.
Oh right, the one thing I sort of like I guess wanted it might be something we could just sort of like talk about like in writing later on, but the Kurth triggers. I'm so I was sort of like torn between like the like there's one set of triggers which is about getting triggered when another werewolf enters the territory, which would be kind of more, I guess, sort of like pack related, and it makes sense because he's sort of like he's supposed to check on whether people are coming in and out. And the other, but it might not really kind of see much play in the campaign itself. And I think I'm kind of also thinking about more in terms of what will work towards the campaign in terms of interesting storytelling, because if no other werewolf really makes as much of an impact, like or more of an impact than the contagion itself will, that trigger won't really affect much.
I'll put your mind at ease. There will be more than one werewolf in this game.
Fair enough. So I was torn between that or the blood triggers, which is I'm not sure which would be. I mean, I'll leave that up to you. Like, what do you think is more appropriate, like dramatically, for what you're planning?
Let's go for territory.
Okay, well, I'll go for territory then. Yep. And touchstone and stuff like you want to leave for later for just between the two of us. Yeah.
Unless you have a strong idea that you want to voice in front of the group now, but
no, that's fine. That's fine. No.
Okay. All right then. Well, in that case, yes, in under 2 hours, we have created 4 Chronicles of Darkness characters for 4 different games. That's pretty impressive. Admittedly, all 4 of you know the games, but you are all working with second editions, which, especially in the case of Changeling, is very new. And in the case of Promethean, is pretty new as well. And in the case of Werewolf the Forsaken, we're using material in a book that hasn't even been released yet. So, and still props to the Beast, to creating a Beast, just because otherwise I'm leaving you out.
I will say this, like when I was one of the people commenting on the YouTube video about it, sort of like saying that when I first got into Chronicles, like I'd missed the first edition and I kind of went to second first, and I didn't like it at all going in. And now, having actually built a second edition character, I've kind of changed my mind about it. So that's kind of that was an interesting process. So
I think what this has shown, and this will be interesting to see whether any of the viewers agree. I'll obviously have to leave this in after editing, or any of the listeners agree, is how the building blocks of these 4 characters from these 4 different games are ultimately the same. It's the same kind of for every single one, same kind of duration for every single one, and nothing has really run in conflict with each other. And this is the one last thing I want everyone to do before we sign off for the night. We've talked about how we will make social contacts outside of this group, or outside of these characters in our Discord, but for how these characters relate to each other, I would just like the 4 of you to think about a simple crossing paths that your characters might have had with at least one other member of the group. It's always useful coming into something like this that your characters will have had at least one interaction, and it could be friendly, it could be hostile, it could be that academic rivalry that you were talking about before with the Beast. It could be someone stumbling upon the werewolf's territory. It could be a communal. It could be that detachment from humanity that both the Promethean and the Beast share. It could be the striving for hope that the Changeling and the Promethean share. And their absolute inhumanity in appearance, if you look beyond the surface. So in terms of ways your character has crossed paths with one other one in the group, and I'd like every character to have been touched by this, does anyone want to go first and basically pick one of the other characters and suggest how you may have met? I was greeted by silence.
I think I do have one. Something that could be an easy end to explore is, while I understand, I think that disquiet won't be much of an issue for the Promethean once things get fully underway with the contagion. Before that happens, beasts are immune to disquiet. So having crossed paths with the Promethean before would have created an opportunity for that Promethean to experience what an interaction free of disquiet and free of those kind of enforced expectations would look like. How they would have crossed paths, I think that my character definitely goes places she doesn't belong to learn things. That sounds like they have that in common, so that could be an easy way to link up there.
Okay. All right. So the beast went intruding into a location hit by the Promethean's disquiet, and the Promethean observed that the beast was the only person unaffected during perhaps what was a very tense moment with some humans. So that would imply that at some point in your character's past, Promethean, because we don't have names yet for all of these characters, at some point in your character's past, they lingered for long enough. Something bad happened that made the humans, or the mortals hereabouts, turn on you, but you were able to spot that one of these individuals, who turned out to be our beast, was not affected. Maybe that meant the beast was able to escort you away from the location, show you a back alley out of what could have potentially turned into a threatening situation for you. But we can work on that. Okay.
I have somewhat of an idea. So basically, when he's sort of sure he's not being watched, sort of like part of his deal with his totem is that he kind of has to, at times, still go back to the like the LGBT city block of Wellington every once in a while to check if everything is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he might sort of, if he at least thinks he's not being watched, he might go into like one of his old haunts and kind of just spend the night, like a few hours. So like clubs like that will have kind of, I guess, sort of like cabaret nights or like karaoke nights. So maybe the changeling has been there just for like celebration purposes, like to kind of I don't know, because he was sort of like talking about not like kind of like feeling the grind of like the everyday again. Maybe just exploring the city and kind of
If you're Spring Court, and honestly, I would say
that's what I can figure it. Yeah,
you could actually take it farther than that. And one of the clubs, not that you would know this, but
one of the
clubs is a Spring Court run haunt that, like, you know, the changelings have the real club in the basement.
I like that idea a lot. That could be interesting.
The changelings have there, because that's the kind of thing they would do. I mean, that's a great place to harvest glamour. That's a great like a Fey run club. Well, not Fey. Yeah. A changeling run club. A Fey run club.
Yeah. Suddenly this man took a horrible turn.
Oh no. Back in Arcadia, this is bad. Okay. But a changeling run club by the the Spring Court. That I'm sure that happens. So
that kind of works out, and I mean, like he'll have been like the explicitly like looking very, very just miserable, like kind of. I mean, because he's kind of there used to be a better time where he could kind of celebrate, but right now it's more of kind of like, I used to go here all the time, but now I can't really enjoy it in the same way that I used to.
The person that walks in the club and they just seem more depressed that they're in it.
Basically, yeah.
I've seen that.
Never
I've seen that. Like, person, it's usually when they're walking with friends and it's the third person in the row, and you can tell that they didn't want to go out, but everyone else did.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay, all right. I think in that case we have some connections in the group. Not every character needs to be connected to every other character, but that means the Promethean and the Beast have something in common. The Werewolf and the Changeling have something in common. We can always build on further connections later on, but I think this is a nice way to establish our connections. It allows us, when the Chronicle begins, to have two characters in the same place at the same time, or at the very least to have each other's phone number. So with all that said, I think, barring any other questions, we are done with character creation. So do any of you have any other questions? Erica?
I do. I have one quick question. I know that you wanted these character sheets emailed to you shortly after this session. In terms of things like history, appearance, those minor details on like page 4 or 2, depending on what sheet you're using, do you want us to fill that out now before sending it? Or do you want us to wait a bit before like working with you in Discord to figure out our history before we fill that stuff in?
Let's work on Discord on that. I think we'll spend it. So yeah, you don't need to send your sheets to me immediately. We'll over the next couple of days, we'll work on Discord just to fill in any of the blanks on page 2, or as you say, page 4. And yeah, then we can share the completed sheets with each other. I want this game to be pretty open. You're not going to start with massive secrets from each other, despite what the Beast may want. And yeah, and that will help us all get a feel for what all of us are playing. So let's do that. Any questions for anyone else?
The only thing I'll say for now is like I'm still in the middle of filling out the totem details about the cat, so like it's unfinished. But yeah, once I finished, once I send it to you, like it's not finished yet. We can.
Well, as I say, we'll spend time writing up character history and the like over the next couple of days. So you've got plenty of time.
Okay, fair enough. No, that's it. Yeah.
Okay then. Well, in that case, thank you very much, all 4 of you, for participating in what is the inaugural Gentleman Game, a Patreon session. Apologies for delaying it for a couple of days, but I think it was worth it. And we will.
Not your fault.
Well, we will get together again very soon for our first session of this game, but I'm looking forward to it. And I will have to edit this down so that we can broadcast it, because I think this went very well.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So I'm going to click stop broadcast. Thank you to anyone who decided to listen for this 2 hours and 6 minute broadcast.